Today, we're going to be exploring the legend of the Blair Witch and the cultural phenomenon that was the 1999 horror flick of the same name. So without further ado, light a candle and down your potion because this is Crime Coven. Born Eilish Abigail Kedward in 1729, Ellie Kedward was an Irish immigrant from Glengarriff, Ireland. She later moved to the United States and settled in Maryland in a tiny town called Blair. Not much is known about her early life in Ireland or exactly when she immigrated, but in 1784, some unexplained and unnerving events started taking place in the town. Townspeople in Blair began to notice that children from the town were going missing for hours and days on end. When they'd return, they'd have no explanation or recollection of where they had been. After a child went missing and then reappeared, they'd be in a severely weakened physical state. Their skin would be pale and they'd be sick and short of breath. Soon, they began to fall gravely ill. A couple of the children actually died as a result of this illness. This pattern continued in many different children in the town for months. The citizens of the town began to point fingers at Ellie Kedward. She was 55 years old at the time, unwed and childless. She was seen by the townspeople as a suspicious old hag. This type of woman, of course, was looked down upon in society at the time. Ellie was accused of using black magic to mesmerize the town's children into entering the Black Hills forest with her. There, she'd draw blood from the innocent children to use for her unholy rituals. Their innocence was key to her evil biddings, because blood of the innocent was the perfect fuel for her nefarious magic rituals. She enchanted the children to keep them weakened and returning to her for continuous use, rather than disposing of them in a full-on ritual blood sacrifice. In the winter of 1785, Ellie Kedward was banished from the town of Blair after several local children accused her of performing witchcraft. She was shunned by the community for her heinous crimes. Not only was she shunned, she was repeatedly tortured by the townsfolk. They wanted to make an example of her and cleanse the community of the evil she brought upon them. They bound her arms and legs with rope and blindfolded her. They then dragged her into the cold winter forest and left her for dead. Day after day, a group of men from the town went back into the woods to check where her body had been left. They were shocked to find that she was still alive for days after she'd been left to die. It was suspected that she survived from the sheer force of her wicked will and her dark connections to the underworld. It had appeared that even wild animals of the woods inexplicably steered clear of her. Over the course of a week, some of the townspeople returned to the forest and tortured her in what they saw as a holy religious ritual. They viewed her as a loyal servant to the devil and wanted to make her suffer. Since they couldn't be completely sure she'd die from exposure, they took matters into their own hands to rid the town of her wicked soul. Heavy stones were tied to each of her limbs, and she was hung from a tree in the Black Hills forest. The last words she uttered was an eternal curse on the town of Blair and all of its citizens. Her body was eventually taken down, and her bones were buried in a shallow grave. Her ashes were scattered in the winds of the forest in which she met her demise. It was later thought that the act of the wind spreading her ashes about is what bound her unholy spirit to those very woods for all of eternity. The townspeople justified what they had done as doing right by the Lord, an attempt to cleanse her soul of the evil within it. Ellie's curse on the town had caused all manner of accidents, untimely deaths, and disappearances. Crops began to fail, and the weather would turn incredibly violent for only a few moments before instantly clearing up again. Animals in the town began to display unusual behavior too. Normally peaceful animals began to attack people for seemingly no reason at all. Devilish apparitions would appear in one's room or on one's field, along with mass nightmares, some including Ellie herself, tormenting the townspeople and children. 1 year later, all of her accusers, half the town's children, and a quarter of the adults had vanished without a trace. Fearing the curse she had spoken in her last breath was true, the remaining townspeople immediately fled Blair, vowing to never speak the name Ellie Kedward ever again. The town was abandoned for 40 years. Then, in 1824, Blair was rediscovered and renamed Burkittsville. The new villagers held the first annual wheat harvest picnic that year. During the event, a 10-year-old girl named Eileen Treckle wandered off towards the Tappy East Creek and drowned in the shallow water. 11 eyewitnesses claimed to have seen a ghostly white hand reach up out of the water and pull her under. The creek was searched, but Eileen's body was never recovered. Afterwards, the creek mysteriously became clogged with oily bundles of sticks, rendering the water useless for 13 days. A man mistakenly drank the water, and it killed him, while several animals also got sick and died from the creek water. The incident was the first of several to be blamed on the Blair Witch. There had been many other sightings of the Blair Witch in the area and the surrounding woods. In 1886, 8-year-old Robin Weaver was in the forest around Burkittsville. She got lost and met an old woman whose feet, according to Robin, quote, did not touch the ground. She was skeptical and frightened of the old woman at first, but the woman acted in a generous manner. So Robin followed the old woman deep into the wood to an old abandoned house. The old woman invited Robin in, so she entered the house and followed the woman down to the basement. The old woman said she must depart and left quickly, promising to return soon. Hours passed as Robin sat in the basement, which slowly grew darker as afternoon faded into evening. Robin became more and more panicked. She had been feeling a growing feeling of evil ever since she stepped into the basement. As she pictured herself all alone in the darkening woods, Robin stood up and found a window in the basement. She squeezed herself through and ran through the dark forest and out of the woods completely. Without stopping or looking back, she raced into Burkittsville, to which she returned safely. From then on, she avoided the woods and claimed to feel an evil presence lurking about the Burkittsville forest. However, while Robin had been in the basement, she had been missed at home. Her grandmother had become nervous and alerted the authorities. The Burkittsville police sent a search party up into the woods to rescue her at exactly the same time Robin was being led into the cellar by the old woman. The police arrived in the woods and began searching for any signs of Robin. When they arrived at Coffin Rock, the wicked spirit of Ellie Kedward assailed the search party. She had just left Robin in the basement in order to seek them out. The Blair Witch slaughtered them, she disemboweled them, and left their corpses strewn about on Coffin Rock, then hastily returned to the house to kill and feed on Robin. When she discovered the empty house and realized that Robin had fled, she was furious. Ellie Kedward took the corpses of the search party and dragged them off into the deep forest. This incident happened all in a matter of about 2 hours, but not before another search party was sent to check on where the first search party was. They had stumbled upon the disemboweled corpses of the first search party and knew of an evil presence in the Burkittsville woods. If you're still with me, there's one more tale of the Blair Witch coming up after the break. In 1940, a man named Rustin Parr abducted 7 children from Burkittsville. He was a hermit who lived on the outskirts of town near the woods. As Rustin was already being driven insane by the spirit of Ellie Kedward, he stumbled about the forest at night and began chanting foreign phrases in his sleep. So kidnapping children didn't seem too difficult a task for him to accomplish. He went into Burkittsville and took the first group of children he found. He accomplished this by promising them candy if they went with him back to his house. He took the children back to his secluded house near the woods, murdered them, and brutally disemboweled them, just as Ellie had done with the search party. Parr hid the secret for 2 days until Ellie Kedward reappeared to him in a dream and proclaimed, "Peace shall come to thee, thee reveal thy actions." Parr walked into town the next morning repeating the phrase, quote, "I'm finally finished." At first, no one knew what he meant, but when police ventured into the woods looking for his cabin, they found 7 corpses of the abducted children in his cellar. They removed them, took them back into town, and the announcement of what Rustin Parr had done tore up the community. The citizens of Burkittsville wanted him to be executed. Rustin didn't deny anything. He told them he had been previously ordered by the malicious spirit of Ellie Kedward to come into Burkittsville and take as many children as he could. He confessed to the last degree and told authorities that he was merely doing what an old woman dressed in black had told him to do. Parr was convicted and sentenced to death. He was hung by the neck until dead in 1941. There have been numerous sightings of Ellie Kedward, the Blair Witch, for centuries, and some claim that she is still haunting the woods to this day. Whether or not you believe in the Blair Witch, it's hard to deny the impact the legend and folklore has had on pop culture. The 1999 film The Blair Witch Project was a low-budget, found footage style movie based on a group of film students going into the Black Hills Forest in search of the Blair Witch. It had a budget of only $60,000 and ended up grossing an impressive $250 million in the box office, with sequels and spin-offs to boot. So as we wrap up the legend of the Blair Witch, I encourage you to keep an open mind and decide for yourself whether or not you believe in the haunting spirit of Elly Kedward. Is the Blair Witch real, or is she just a figment of our collective imagination? Is the unseen force within the Black Hills Forest the real witch people have experienced? Or was the whole lot of this legend carefully manufactured in a writer's room meant for the silver screen? I'd like to believe in the legend, since there are so many reported incidents and sightings over literally hundreds of years in that area, but it could just be the allure of movie magic. I remember when I first watched the original Blair Witch Project, I was young, maybe like 12 years old, and I was straight up terrified of it. The scariest part is just the general, hopeless feeling of being lost deep in the woods and not knowing how to get out. But also the bundles of sticks hanging from the trees in the movie are really spooky. And the scenes where the film crew is camping in their tents at night and they hear all of the rustling and threatening sounds outside of the tent, that has always scared me. I'm certainly not a camping in the woods type of girl, so I know I'll never encounter the Blair Witch, but the legend is interesting to learn about. All right, everybody, thanks for listening, and let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed this first episode. If you did, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and share this episode with your friends. You can follow us and view photos for every episode on our Instagram at Crime Coven Podcast. And if you have ideas or case suggestions, please send an email to crimecoven@gmail.com. I'll see you next time, and remember, in a world where you could be anything, be kind.